Her four sisters wore diamonds, laughing as they pointed at her tear-stained face and simple gown. They thought she was the family shame, completely unloved. But they didn't know the powerful billionaire standing behind them was watching everything, ready to change her life forever. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Palace Hall caught the glittering sequins of Tari's emerald gown, making her look like a queen. Beside her, Aoife and Kemi laughed loudly, their gold and burgundy dresses swirling as they deliberately nudged past their youngest sister, Zola. Alero, the bride-to-be, adjusted her heavy tiara and sneered. "Zola, why did you even come? Look at your faded blue and gold ankara. You look like a maid. Please stand far away so you don't ruin our family photos with your poverty." Zola swallowed the burning lump in her throat, her fingers clutching the straps of her cheap handbag. She had spent her last savings to travel to Umuahia for Alero's traditional introduction, hoping her family would finally welcome her back. Instead, the moment she walked into the hall, her sisters turned her into a public laughingstock. They pointed at her bare fingers, whispering loudly to the wealthy guests about the sister who failed in Lagos and couldn't even find a husband. Tears, hot and heavy, finally spilled over Zola's long eyelashes, tracking down her mahogany skin. She turned her face away, her shoulders trembling under the weight of the cruel whispers echoing across the room. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing the breath from her lungs. Then, the heavy oak doors of the palace hall swung open. The laughter died instantly. A suffocating silence blanketed the room as a tall man stepped inside. He wore a flawless, midnight blue tuxedo that accentuated his broad shoulders and commanding presence. His face was a mask of cold, unyielding authority. It was Tundai Rabalai, the mysterious tech billionaire whose family owned half the commercial real estate in the country. He rarely attended public events, and his sudden appearance made the elders adjust their coral beads in panic. Tari immediately smoothed her dress, a predatory smile spreading across her lips. "He is looking at us," she hissed to Aoife. "Quick, look sophisticated." Tun didn't look at Tari. His piercing eyes swept over the glittering crowd, ignoring the wealthy suitors and the waving politicians, until they locked directly onto the back of the room. They locked onto Zola, who was wiping a fresh tear from her cheek. A sharp glint of recognition, mixed with something deeply dangerous, flashed across Tun's face. He didn't speak to the hosts. He didn't bow to the elders. With slow, deliberate strides, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor, he walked past the outstretched hands of the city's elite. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, every neck craning to see where the richest man in the room was going. Tari stepped forward, raising her hand to greet him, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Welcome, Chief Tund. We are so honored." Tund walked right past her, his shoulder brushing her aside as if she were made of glass. He stopped exactly 2 feet in front of Zola. The entire hall held its breath. The silence was so profound that the dripping of a spilled drink could be heard across the room. Zola slowly raised her eyes, her breath catching in her throat as she looked into the face of the man she had spent 3 agonizing years trying to forget. Tund looked down at her red, swollen eyes. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a silk handkerchief, and gently wiped a stray tear from her cheek. Then, his voice boomed through the silent hall, cold as ice. "Who made you cry, Zola?" Zola couldn't speak. Her voice was trapped behind 3 years of unhealed trauma. She looked past Tun's shoulder and saw her mother, Mama Asabe, standing by the pillar, her hands pressed against her mouth in absolute shock. Tari's face had turned an asymmetric shade of pale, her lips parted but completely silent. "Tund," Zola whispered, her hands shaking. "Please, don't do this here." "I asked a question, Zola," Tund repeated, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous frequency that made the nearby guests step back. He turned his head slightly, his icy glare sweeping over Tari, Aoife, Kemi, and Alero, who were now huddled together, their previous arrogance completely evaporated. "Did these women touch you?" "No," Zola breathed, gripping her blue ankara wrapper. "They were just telling me I don't belong here. And they are right. I should leave." She turned to run toward the exit, but Tun's hand shot out, gently but firmly catching her wrist. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through both of them, a spark from a fire that had never truly gone out. 3 years ago, in Lagos, they had been everything to each other. She was a brilliant young architect. He was the visionary client. For 8 beautiful months, they built a world together. Until the morning Zola found an official family arrangement document on his desk, linking the Irabali name with the Nwosu dynasty. Believing she was just a temporary plaything before his high society marriage, she packed her bags, changed her number, and fled to Umuahia, carrying a heartbreaking secret she never shared. "You are never running from me again," Tun said softly, his grip tender but unbreakable. He turned fully to the crowd, pulling Zola to his side. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting this ceremony, but I came here today to find my missing piece. 3 years ago, a misunderstanding drove this woman away from me. I have searched every city in this country to find her." The compound exploded into furious whispers. Tari stepped forward, jealousy overriding her fear. "Chief Tund, there must be a mistake. This is Zola. She is a failure. She lives in a single room down the street. She has nothing." Tun's eyes narrowed into slits as he looked at Tari. "She has me, and everything I own belongs to her." He looked down at Zola, his expression softening into pure devotion. "The Nwosu arrangement you saw 3 years ago was an old contract signed by my grandfather before I was born. I broke it the very week you left, Zola. I told my family I would rather lose my inheritance than build a life without you. I have spent 2 years building Obi Continental Group independently, just so I could hand the keys to the woman who inspired it." Zola gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He had broken the engagement? He had given up everything for her. "But that is not the only reason I am here," Tund continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Zola and her immediate family could hear. He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers with a sudden, agonizing intensity. "6 months ago, your firm did a historic renovation of our old office. They found a brown envelope stuck behind your old desk drawer, Zola. A letter addressed to me, dated the day you ran away." The color completely drained from Zola's face. Her heart stopped beating. "The letter. I read it, Zola. I read what you wrote at the very bottom." The silence that followed was suffocating. Zola felt the walls of the palace hall closing in on her. Her sisters stared, their eyes wide with confusion. But Mama Asabe suddenly stepped forward, her burgundy wrapper trailing on the floor as she rushed toward her daughter, tears streaming down her aged face. Zola looked at Tund, her chest heaving as the secret she had buried in the darkest corner of her soul was dragged into the light. "I lost the pregnancy, Tund," she sobbed, her strength finally failing as she collapsed against his chest. "2 months after I came back to Umuahia, I was completely alone. I was stressed, I was grieving, and my sisters told me it was a punishment for my sins, and I swore I would never speak of it again." A collective gasp rippled through the family. Mama Asabe fell to her knees, wailing openly, grabbing Zola's legs. "My daughter, my beautiful child, you carried this mountain alone. Jehovah, forgive me. I was so blinded by Alero's wedding that I didn't see my own child bleeding to death inside." Tund closed his eyes, wrapping his powerful arms around Zola, holding her so tightly it felt as though he were trying to glue her broken pieces back together. A single, heavy tear escaped his eye and landed on her box braids. "You were never supposed to be alone," he choked out, his voice thick with suppressed rage and sorrow. "Never again." He raised his head, looking at the 4 sisters who were now weeping, completely shattered by the weight of their own cruelty. Tari sank to the floor beside her mother, her emerald dress dropping into the dust, her hands covering her face as deep, guttural sobs tore through her chest. "Zola, forgive me," Tari begged, reaching out a trembling hand. "We were jealous. You were always the smartest, the most beautiful, and we hated how small we felt around your light. We didn't know. God, we didn't know what you suffered." Zola looked at her sisters. The anger that had fueled her for 3 years suddenly melted away, replaced by a profound, cleansing wave of peace. She looked at Tund, who was waiting for her cue. "Get up, Tari," Zola said softly, extending her hand to pull her eldest sister up. "We have all broken things that need fixing. Today, the hiding stops." Tund smiled, a brilliant, breathtaking expression that transformed his stoic face. He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a small, navy blue velvet box. Inside sat a magnificent, flawless oval ruby rings set in pure gold, glowing like a living ember. Zola, Tund said, his voice echoing with absolute certainty. You are the daughter of a king, and you have crawled through the valley of shadows alone. Will you let me build the rest of our kingdom with you? Zola smiled, the most radiant, complete smile Amwahia had ever seen. Yes, Tund. Yes. 6 months later, the compound was filled with the sound of laughter and traditional music. Zola stood in an exquisite ivory and gold bridal gown, her box braids pinned into a royal crown. Beside her stood Tari, her chief bridesmaid, adjusting her veil with genuine, tearful pride. The farm that had long prayed for rain had finally received a downpour, and as Tund took her hand at the altar, everyone knew this was an empire built to last.